faith-driven entrepreneur started off because at Sovereign's Capital, we found ourselves after a couple of years, and actually, Mark, it was 9.5 years ago. Actually, it was 10 years ago in February that you and I first got together and you hosted us in Birmingham. So a long time ago. 4 or 5 years into Sovereigns, we found that we were saying no to 99 out of 100 businesses that were coming to us for financing. And that's okay if you're Battery or Sequoia or US Venture Partners, but these were men and women driven by their faith. And so our first iteration of faith-driven movements was to launch something called Faith-Driven Entrepreneur with a daily blog and a weekly podcast, which is now listened to in more than 140 countries. That's my new vanity metric. I love that. And we have a monthly newsletter and then also an annual conference. And that was great for 2 or 3 years. And then after time, we came to understand that when an entrepreneur is looking for $500,000 equity financing or $200,000 of debt financing, and you send them a link to a podcast, you haven't exactly scratched their itch. And so a bunch of us, yourself included, 3 years ago, got together and said, what does it look like if we encourage other people to jump into the world that Sovereigns is in? And to be intentional about how their faith manifests itself in the way that they do investments, make investments. And so let's go out there and let's look and find out what already exists. And to be clear, there are a whole bunch of different things that did already exist. The Kingdom Advisors audience, of course, knows very well about what's been going on for maybe 20 years or so under Ron Blue's leadership at the beginning, and then picked up by so many other people. One of the things, though, we did want to focus on over these last 3 years is to look at the ways that the gospel might be proclaimed through the work that we do. And to be clear, through doing that with gentleness and respect. But we went out and found a number of real estate funds that already had a gospel proclamation element in them, by the way that they did resident chaplaincy through ministries like Apartment Life. And then we found out that there were a good number and a developing number of public equity firms that were looking to do that, and especially private equity funds. There's a lot of latitude with private equity funds in a way that they can bring together chaplaincy or encourage faith-driven employee resource groups. And we've been incredibly encouraged by how many of them exist not only domestically, but then also overseas. So a group of funds that already existed, some that have been launched over the last 3 years, and then maybe my favorite group, which are private equity funds that are being retrofitted to having spiritual integration. I think about Goodwater Capital, for instance, $1 billion plus fund in tech-enabled consumer goods that recast their fund last winter after 8 years of success and say, you know what, we want to be more like Micah 6:8. And we're going to bring on board Dave Gibbons to help provide chaplaincy for all of our secular CEOs. And so that's a bit about faith-driven movement. So we have podcasts across the entrepreneur and the investor side. And thank you.
And actually what's interesting is, you know, Eversource Wealth Advisors is really a platform built for faith-driven advisors and to really enable them to be able to do what they do through culture, community, capabilities, compensation, and a client experience. But also, as you know, what we've been also working on is providing them a full array of investment strategies, including faith-based model portfolios and privately held impact investments. But most of the advisors we talk to aren't enabled to do that. And so we've created a little game, and for you all who are on the phone or on the Zoom today, try this at our booth. It's called Impact Spark. And basically through Impact Spark, you can determine in 1 minute or less what other companies like Henry is talking about that might be a good match for you. And it takes you to the faith-driven community website. Henry, tell us a little bit about how the marketplace is working and how it got launched. And then we'll talk a little bit about how people can get involved.
Sure. The marketplace was launched because, again, we're finding that these businesses were coming in looking for financing. And we're trying our best to try to put them in touch with some of the different funds that we knew of. But we were just particularly encouraged by the number of companies that are coming in overseas. And there just weren't enough overseas funds that were focusing on overseas. And then a bunch of us got together and said, let's put together a shared Google spreadsheet of the different deals that we're looking at out of our family offices. So these are deals that we couldn't invest out of Sovereigns because it was just wrong stage, industry, or geography. But they're men and women really driven by their faith, particularly in geographies where there wasn't any type of a government bailout program. And as the word got out, more and more people came in, and we put it up on HTML. And now we've got just about 200 different great entrepreneurial opportunities around the
Wow.
world. Think of kind of like an angel list, if you will, but where in each company you can see how the company's performed, their plans, the structure of the deal, and then how they look at spiritual integration. So you look at things like chaplaincy right alongside things like customer acquisition costs and lifetime value. And so as we launched that out, we started getting a lot of great feedback. Over the first quarter, more than 25 companies were funded, and then we decided to launch funds recently as well. But I'll tell you, this new tool that you've developed to be able to help people to understand what companies they might look at, I think is a great one. As people try to understand, gosh, do I really care about Eastern Europe, or does geography matter more to me than job creation or economic development? What level of spiritual integration do I want to see? So your ability to help refine that is important. We anticipate that by the end of this year, as we've talked to more than 50 partner organizations, is that we'll have more than 1,000 companies up on the marketplace.
That's
So
amazing.
Eversource's ability to help people kind of winnow in on the deals that are most important to them is super important.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So what are some of the impact metrics that you guys look at? I know poverty alleviation is one, but what are some of the impacts that we're having and these companies are having in the world today for the kingdom?
Yeah. So I really look at it on three levels. The first level is there an intentionality by the entrepreneur to run their business for the glory of God? Full stop. If there is an intentionality, then we actually just move into, talk to me about the business. Tell me about your KPIs. Tell me about how you delight your customer. Tell me, as I said before, things like customer acquisition cost and lifetime value, churn by cohort. Talk to us about your team. Talk to us about the experience. Tell us about what you've learned so far about your customer. Tell us about the trends that you have. And then with a good understanding that the business is really undergirded by a sense of excellence, then we go back to the spiritual integration again. The first thing we look at is, who are the other men and women that are on board as angel investors? One of the key differentiators of our platform is this concept of champion. It's coming alongside another price-driven angel investor to be able to invest on the same terms. And then in their words, they talk about the spiritual integration in the company. And then we have a 4x4 matrix where we looked at how the spiritual integration, and particularly gospel proclamation, finds itself in the different companies. Do they share their faith in a culturally winsome way with their employees? Do they do that with outside stakeholders? Do the customers that they work with come to understand why they do what they do? And so we've got that 4x4 matrix that we use as well. And then one of my favorite initiatives, of course, is chaplaincy. Love chaplaincy. But one of the things that we're seeing increasingly, Mark, and this is really new over the course of the last 18 months or so, is this emphasis towards faith-driven employee resource groups, which are Christians at a company coming together to pray for the business, sometimes under the leadership of executive leadership, but it's often best done when it's actually done at a grassroots level. Now, for the larger companies, that kind of concept needs to go across other types of faith systems as well. But we love seeing it because we believe that truth stands out in the marketplace of ideas.
Yeah, that's great. Those are all extremely exciting. And one of the things I was curious about, how much capital is out there, kingdom capital, you think is out there in the world that could be pitted against this?
Well, it's unlimited. We worship a God who took 5 loaves and 2 fish and fed 5,000. So it's an abundance economy. But you know, some people will say that there are trillions of dollars of investment assets that are already controlled by Christ followers. I think it's a very, very large number. And Mark, what we're coming to see is that the body of Christ is generally awakening. You know, there's this old paradigm that I want to make as much money as I possibly can over here in my left hand. And then to the degree that I understand the biblical message of generosity, I want over here to the ministries and causes I care about most.
Yes.
But now what's happening is a whole universe of folks is understanding that the very process of placing that investment capital might accomplish the same ministry and missions goals as they previously thought only were capable through philanthropy. And yes, you can do it through patient capital or social or impact capital, but increasingly you can do it in market return capital as well. We're seeing the guy who ran Warburg Pincus's healthcare fund left to create a kingdom fund. Same thing with the guy who started Goldman Sachs' EdTech practice, left Goldman Sachs to start an EdTech fund with Goldman Sachs as his largest LP. So you're seeing that integration now between investing and faith much more than we saw when even just 3 years ago when a bunch of us got together.
Yes, and we actually just heard the announcement today that Guidestone, the largest faith-based mutual fund complex in the country, just announced a fund that we've been working on with them for several years, which includes a certain percentage of impact investments, private equity investments into the fund. So that's a very exciting development as well. So I guess to close out, how can people get involved in this movement?
Well, the most important thing, I get excited, Mark, about any number of funds and any number of developments. But I think that what really needs to undergird this movement is one of heart posture. It's as simple as a husband and a wife getting down on their knees and asking God how they might steward the assets that He's entrusted them with. And how might they think about that in terms of investments? And how do they think about that in terms of giving? They really blend together. When this becomes an opportunity to commune with the living God, it's just about stewarding assets. Now, with that, I think that there's a great opportunity for people to get together in communities. And yes, we love what the stories we get to tell on the Faith Driven Investor podcast each week. We love the blogs that are coming out in the communities in the marketplace. But the most important thing is just an awareness that God, of course, can use our investment assets just like He uses our philanthropic assets.
Amen. Well, Henry, thank you so much. Next time I want to trade places with you, and maybe I'll do the interview from the slopes and you'll sit in the office with the Kingdom Impact sign behind you. So thanks a lot today. We appreciate you. We love what you're doing and love being a part of it. And thank you all for joining us today for the Eversource breakout session on Kingdom Impact Investing. If you want to know more, please go to our booth. We have several of our team members who are available right now to talk. If you want to talk, if you want to chat, and hope you enjoy the rest of the Kingdom Advisors Conference. Y'all have a great rest of the day in conference. Bye.
Thank you all. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Henry.